The story of the day the meteor hit begins not with destruction, but with a thriving world full of life. This was the late Cretaceous period, about 66 million years ago. To put that in perspective for someone new to Earth's history, imagine our planet's 4.5 billion year timeline as a single day. The dinosaurs appear around dinner time, and this late Cretaceous moment is just before midnight, the final minutes of their era. The Cretaceous period as a whole lasted from about 145 million years ago to 66 million years ago, the last part of the Mesozoic era, often called the Age of Reptiles, because that's when dinosaurs and similar creatures became the main players on land, in the air, and in the water. The continents back then were still shifting slowly due to plate tectonics, the process where Earth's outer shell is divided into large pieces that move like rafts on a molten sea below. They had broken away from the supercontinent Pangaea, which existed earlier in the Mesozoic. By the late Cretaceous, the continents had drifted into positions that were starting to look more like the modern world, though still quite different. North America was split down the middle by a shallow inland sea. Europe existed as a chain of islands scattered across a warm ocean. Africa stood alone as its own continent, with its northern coastline bordered by the vast, warm Tethys Sea, an ancient ocean that once separated the northern land masses, like Europe and Asia, from the southern ones, like Africa and India, and helped keep the planet's climate hot and humid by circulating warm water around the globe. India, meanwhile, was still an island continent at this time. Millions of years earlier, it had broken away from the southern part of the ancient supercontinent and had been slowly drifting northward across the Tethys Sea. This long journey would eventually bring India crashing into Asia tens of millions of years later, pushing up the Himalayan mountains we know today. Australia and Antarctica remained joined together at this point, covered in thick forests rather than ice. The climate during the late Cretaceous was significantly warmer and more humid than the world we know today. There were no permanent ice caps at either pole, no frozen continent covering Antarctica like we see now, and no massive glaciers on Greenland. Instead, global average temperatures were roughly 9 to 18 degrees Fahrenheit, 5 to 10 degrees Celsius, higher than modern averages. This extra warmth meant that even the polar regions supported thick forests rather than ice sheets, with mild conditions year-round in many places and no extreme frozen winters anywhere on Earth. This higher temperature came mainly from elevated levels of greenhouse gases, especially carbon dioxide, released by widespread volcanic activity and other natural processes at the time. The result was a greenhouse-like planet. Lush, tropical-like forests extended much farther toward the poles than they do today, and rainfall was generally abundant, especially in equatorial and coastal areas, creating widespread humid environments that supported dense plant life and large animal populations. Seasons existed but were gentler. No extreme winters. Instead, wet and dry periods alternated, with monsoons bringing heavy rains to areas like what is now India or eastern North America. Near the equator, it was humid and tropical, with temperatures rarely dropping below 68 degrees Fahrenheit, 20 degrees Celsius. Even at higher latitudes, like near the North Pole, forests grew where today it's frozen tundra. The air felt thick and alive, carrying scents of damp earth, resin from trees, and blooming plants. Oxygen levels were similar to today, but the warmth allowed animals to be more active year-round. Plants formed the foundation of this world, and they were a mix of ancient and emerging types. Gymnosperms, plants with naked seeds like conifers, think early pine trees with needles and cones. Cycads, short, palm-like plants with tough leaves and large cones. And ginkgos, trees with fan-shaped leaves that turn golden, still dominated many forests. These created tall, dense woodlands where sunlight filtered through in dappled patterns, but flowering plants, or angiosperms, were spreading rapidly. These are the ancestors of modern flowers, fruits, and hardwoods like oaks and maples. They had advantages. First, they produced true flowers, colourful, often sweet-smelling structures that acted like advertisements for insects. Bees, flies, butterflies, and other small creatures were drawn to the bright colours, scents, and nectar. As the insects moved from flower to flower collecting food, they unintentionally carried pollen, the male reproductive dust, on their bodies, helping the plants reproduce more efficiently and reliably than relying on wind alone, which was how most gymnosperms spread their pollen. The second major advantage was fruits. After a flower is pollinated, it develops into a fruit that protects and nourishes the seeds inside. These fruits could be soft and juicy, like modern berries or figs, hard and nut-like, or even winged or fluffy. The key benefit was that animals, dinosaurs, early mammals, birds, or insects were attracted to many of these fruits because they were tasty or nutritious. When a dinosaur ate a fruit, it swallowed the seeds along with the fleshy part. The seeds then passed through the animal's digestive system unharmed, often even improved by the process, as stomach acids softened the seed coat. Later, the dinosaur would deposit the seeds far away from the parent plant, along with a little natural fertilizer from its droppings. This is called zookery, or animal-mediated seed dispersal. Think of it like this. If a plant simply dropped its seeds straight down at its own base, the baby plants would have to compete with the parent for sunlight, water, and space. But by hitching a ride inside a hungry animal, the seeds could travel miles away, perhaps carried in a hadrosaur's gut for days before being excreted in a new clearing or riverbank. This gave angiosperms a huge edge. They could colonize new areas faster, spread farther, and take over more of the landscape. Fruits also helped protect the seeds from drying out or being eaten by insects before they could sprout. In a late Cretaceous meadow, you might see ferns carpeting the ground like a green rug, horsetails, tall, jointed plants like giant pipe cleaners along riverbanks, and early magnolias blooming with white petals. The landscape was colourful for the first time, with reds, yellows, and purples dotting the green. Rivers wound through these areas, depositing fertile soil that nourished even more growth. From a distance, the world looked like a vast garden, buzzing with life. This vegetation supported an incredible array of animals, creating balanced ecosystems where everything was connected. Food chains started with plants feeding herbivores, herbivores feeding carnivores, and scavengers cleaning up the remains. Dinosaurs were the stars, but to explain them simply, they were a group of reptiles that evolved around 230 million years ago with upright postures, legs straight under the body, like birds or mammals today, not sprawling like lizards. This made them efficient movers. They ranged from tiny, bird-like creatures to colossal giants. Not everything big was a dinosaur. Flying pterosaurs and swimming mosasaurs were relatives, but not true dinosaurs. Birds, however, are dinosaurs that survived to today. Mammals existed too, but they were small and hidden. Insects filled the air: beetles, flies, early bees pollinating flowers. The sounds were alive: low rumbles from large herbivores, shrieks from predators, the buzz of wings. Smells mixed fresh plant sap with the musky odour of animals. The world felt full, vibrant, and in harmony, but fragile as one event would prove. Now, let's zoom in on one of the most common and fascinating groups of plant-eating dinosaurs that lived right up until the very end of the Cretaceous period, the hadrosaurs, often called duck-billed dinosaurs. These animals were everywhere in the late Cretaceous world, especially in places like North America and Asia. To someone new to dinosaurs, think of hadrosaurs as the cows or deer of their time. Herbivores that lived in large groups, spent most of their day eating plants, and were built for efficiency rather than fighting. They weren't the biggest dinosaurs, that title went to the long-necked sauropods, but they were incredibly successful because they were adaptable, fast-growing, and good at turning tough plants into energy. One of the best-known hadrosaurs was Parasaurolophus. This dinosaur lived about 76 to 73 million years ago, mainly in what is now Western North America and possibly parts of Asia. From nose to tail, an adult Parasaurolophus measured around 30 to 40 feet long, about the length of a school bus, and weighed between 2 and 4 tons, roughly the weight of a modern African elephant. Its body was built for a mix of walking on 2 legs and dropping to all 4s when needed. The hind legs were strong and muscular, giving it the ability to run at speeds of 15 to 25 miles per hour in short bursts if danger approached. The front legs were shorter but sturdy, with hoof-like claws that helped support its weight when grazing low. The tail was long and stiff, acting as a counterbalance so the animal could stand upright or lean forward without tipping over. The most striking feature of Parasaurolophus was its crest. This was a long, curved tube of hollow bone that extended backward from the top of the skull, sometimes reaching up to 6 feet in length. It looked a bit like a backward-pointing horn or a curved trumpet. Inside, the crest was hollow with a network of passages connected to the nostrils and nasal cavity. Scientists have studied these structures using modern technology like CT scans of fossils, and the leading idea is that the crest worked like a built-in wind instrument or resonator. When the dinosaur exhaled or forced air through the tubes, it produced deep, low-frequency sounds similar to a trombone or foghorn that could carry for long distances across open landscapes or through dense forests. These calls weren't just random noise, they likely served practical purposes like keeping the herd together while moving, signaling to family members that were out of sight, warning of approaching predators, or even helping males attract mates during breeding season. Some studies suggest the crest could change colour slightly with blood flow, adding a visual display to the sound. From a Parasaurolophus's point of view, daily life centred around the herd. Imagine waking up at dawn in a misty river valley. The air is cool and damp, filled with the scent of wet ferns and blooming flowers. You are part of a group of 50 or more individuals, adults, juveniles, and a few very young hatchlings that hatched from large, oval eggs buried in nests of sand and vegetation. The herd provides safety. Predators are less likely to attack a large group, and many eyes and ears mean better detection of danger. The adults form a loose protective ring around the young as the group moves to feeding grounds. Feeding was the main activity. Parasaurolophus had a broad, flat beak at the front of its mouth, perfect for cropping low-growing plants. It could bite off leaves, stems, or soft shoots with a scissor-like motion. Behind the beak were hundreds of tightly packed teeth arranged in batteries, multiple rows stacked on top of each other. As the front teeth wore down from grinding tough plant fibers, new teeth pushed up from below to replace them, like a never-ending conveyor belt. This allowed the dinosaur to chew constantly without running out of grinding surface. It ate ferns, horsetails, cycads, and the new flowering plants, leaves, flowers, and even some fruits or seeds. A single adult might consume 100 to 200 pounds of vegetation per day, spending most of its waking hours eating. The stomach was large and likely fermented the food slowly, breaking down cellulose, which is the tough part of plants that most animals can't digest, with help from bacteria, similar to how modern cows or elephants process grass. The herd moved in patterns that followed food and water. During the wet season, rivers swelled, creating fresh green growth along floodplains. The dinosaurs waded into shallow water to drink, their beaks dipping in while eyes scanned for threats. In drier times, they migrated to higher ground or forested areas where shade and moisture kept plants alive. Trackways preserved in fossilized mud show these herds walking in parallel lines, adults on the outside, juveniles in the middle, a classic protective formation seen in modern elephants or wildebeest. Life wasn't without danger. Predators like Tyrannosaurus rex or Albertosaurus lurked in the same regions. A Parasaurolophus herd might suddenly freeze at a distant roar, crests blaring alarm calls that echoed across the valley. If a predator approached, the adults would turn to face it, lowering heads and stomping feet to look bigger and more threatening. Juveniles would press close to the center. In extreme cases, the herd might stampede, thundering across the plain in a cloud of dust. Fossils sometimes show bite marks on hadrosaur bones, but many individuals survived attacks with healed injuries, suggesting the herd defense worked well. Parasaurolophus also had to deal with the challenges of growth and reproduction. Eggs were laid in large clutches, sometimes 20 or more, in mound-shaped nests scraped into soft soil. The parents, or at least the herd, likely guarded the nests, as seen in related species where adults stayed nearby. Hatchlings were small, about the size of a large chicken, and grew quickly, reaching full size in perhaps 8 to 10 years. This rapid growth was an advantage in a dangerous world. Get big fast, and you become harder to catch. In many ways, Parasaurolophus represented the peak of hadrosaur success. They were adaptable, social, and efficient at turning abundant plants into energy. Their crests gave them a unique way to communicate across distances, helping herds stay together in vast landscapes. From the perspective of one of these dinosaurs, the late Cretaceous world was a place of constant movement. Following food, avoiding predators, raising young and calling to one another under a warm sky filled with the sounds of life. Now let's turn to another iconic group of late Cretaceous plant eaters, the ceratopsians or horned dinosaurs. These animals were among the last major dinosaur groups to evolve and thrive right up to the very end of the Mesozoic era. For someone new to dinosaurs, think of ceratopsians as the rhinos or bison of their time. Stocky, heavily built herbivores with impressive headgear designed for defense, display, and feeding. They weren't fast runners like some hadrosaurs, but they were tough, powerful, and often lived in groups that made them hard targets for predators. Ceratopsians appeared earlier in the Cretaceous but really hit their peak diversity in the final 10 to 15 million years, especially in western North America, where fossils from places like the Hell Creek Formation show they were common. Triceratops is the most famous ceratopsian and one of the best understood dinosaurs thanks to hundreds of fossils. An adult Triceratops was about 26 to 30 feet long from nose to tail tip, roughly the length of a large truck, and weighed 6 to 12 tons, similar to a modern African elephant or a bit heavier. Its body was low-slung and robust, with 4 strong legs like pillars supporting a barrel-shaped torso. The hind legs were longer than the front ones, giving it a slightly sloping posture that helped it lower its massive head to graze or charge. The tail was short and thick, providing balance but not much for whipping or display. The skin was scaly, possibly with some bony nodules or armor-like bumps in places, and fossils suggest some individuals had colourful patches or frill markings that could have been used for recognition or mating displays. The head of Triceratops was truly spectacular and took up nearly 1/3 of its body length. At the front was a sharp, parrot-like beak made of keratin, the same material as your fingernails or a bird's beak. This beak was perfect for cropping tough vegetation, snipping off leaves, stems, or even woody branches with a powerful bite. Behind the beak came rows of shearing teeth that worked like scissors to slice plants into smaller pieces for swallowing. The most eye-catching features were the horns and frill. There were 3 main horns: a short nasal horn above the beak, sometimes up to 2 feet long, and 2 long brow horns above the eyes, up to 3 feet each in large adults, curving slightly forward like curved swords. These brow horns were solid bone covered in keratin sheaths, making them even sharper and stronger. The bony frill was a wide, shield-like plate extending backward from the skull, sometimes 6 to 7 feet across. It was made of solid bone with a network of blood vessels running through it, and the edges often had small spikes or scallops. The frill wasn't just decorative, it provided attachment points for huge neck muscles that gave Triceratops tremendous head-butting power. It also protected the neck from bites, like a natural shield. Scientists think the frill and horns served multiple roles: defense against predators, especially Tyrannosaurus rex, display for attracting mates or intimidating rivals, and possibly thermoregulation. Blood vessels could flush the frill with blood to cool or warm the head. Fossils show many Triceratops with healed injuries, broken horns, punctured frills, scarred skulls, indicating they used their heads in combat, both against predators and in dominance contests with each other. From a Triceratops's point of view, daily life was a balance of feeding, staying with the group, and staying alert. Imagine being part of a small family unit or loose herd of 5 to 20 individuals, perhaps a few adults, some half-grown juveniles and a couple of young ones staying close to their mothers. You wake at first light in a forested floodplain, the air cool and filled with the scent of dew on ferns and early flowering shrubs. The herd moves slowly to a favorite feeding area where low-growing cycads, ferns, and angiosperm bushes provide plenty to eat. You lower your heavy head using the sharp beak to shear off tough leaves or strip branches. The brow horns help push aside obstacles or hold branches steady while you bite. Your teeth grind the material into pulp and you swallow it whole. Your large gut ferments it slowly to extract nutrients, much like a modern cow or elephant. Feeding takes up most of the day. You graze in short bursts, then rest in shade to chew cud-like masses of food. The herd spreads out slightly, but stays within calling distance. Low grunts or bellows keep everyone connected. Water breaks happen at river edges where you wade in, drink deeply, and perhaps wallow in mud to cool off and deter biting insects. Juveniles stay near adults, learning what plants are good and how to use their small horns for play fighting. The group provides safety. If a predator approaches, the adults form a defensive circle or line, heads lowered, horns forward. A charging triceratops could reach 20 miles per hour, a terrifying sight for any carnivore. Fossils show Tyrannosaurus bite marks on triceratops bones, but many healed, meaning the defense often worked. Social life included more than just protection. During mating season, males likely used their horns and frills in dramatic displays, charging each other, locking horns in pushing matches, or flushing blood into the frill to make it brighter. Winners gained access to females, who chose mates based on size, horn condition, or display quality. Eggs were laid in nests scraped into soft soil, often in groups for mutual protection. Parents, or at least the herd, guarded them until hatching. Young triceratops grew quickly, their horns and frills developing as they matured. Triceratops faced threats daily. Tyrannosaurus rex was the main predator, capable of taking down adults if they were isolated or injured. Smaller carnivores like dromaeosaurs might target juveniles. Injuries were common: broken horns, scarred frills, even healed bites on the body. But Triceratops was built to survive these encounters. Thick skull bones, powerful neck muscles, and group defense gave it an edge. Fossils sometimes show multiple Triceratops found together, suggesting they lived and died in social groups, perhaps herding together during migrations or seasonal floods. In many ways, Triceratops represented the height of ceratopsian adaptation. Their horns and frills made them one of the most formidable herbivores, able to hold their own against the largest predators. From their perspective, the late Cretaceous was a world of constant vigilance, grazing in the sun, calling to the herd, facing down threats with lowered head and forward horns, but also one of abundance, with plenty of plants to eat and companions to share the landscape. They thrived in this environment until the very end, when everything changed in an instant. Moving on to the next major group of late Cretaceous plant eaters, the ankylosaurs, often described as the armored tanks of the dinosaur world. These dinosaurs were built like living fortresses, low to the ground, heavily protected, and designed more for defense than speed or offense. For someone unfamiliar with them, imagine a modern rhinoceros or giant armadillo crossed with a medieval knight's shield, slow-moving, tough as nails, and carrying its own built-in armor plating. Ankylosaurs were among the most heavily defended herbivores of the entire Mesozoic era. They first appeared earlier in the Cretaceous, but became especially common and diverse in the final stages, particularly in North America and Asia, where they shared the landscape with hadrosaurs, ceratopsians, and the big predators. Ankylosaurus is the most famous member of this group and one of the largest. An adult Ankylosaurus measured about 20 to 30 feet long from nose to tail, roughly the length of a large bus, and weighed 4 to 6 tons. Similar to a modern African elephant, its body was wide and low-slung, almost turtle-like, with short, stout legs positioned directly under the body for stability rather than speed. The legs ended in broad, hoof-like feet that helped distribute its heavy weight over soft ground or muddy riverbanks. The tail was thick and muscular at the base, tapering to a narrow tip. But its most remarkable feature was at the very end, a massive club made of fused bone, sometimes as large as a bowling ball or bigger. This club was formed by several tail vertebrae that had grown together and were covered in thick bone armor. When swung, it could generate tremendous force, enough to break the bones of a predator or crack open tough plants. The real standout feature of Ankylosaurus was its armor. The entire back, sides, and even parts of the head were covered in a mosaic of bony plates, knobs, and spikes embedded in thick skin. These osteoderms, which means bone deposits in the skin, varied in size and shape. Some were flat and oval like paving stones, others were tall and pointed like spikes, and many were fused together into a rigid shield across the back. The armor wasn't just decorative, it provided excellent protection against bites and slashes. Fossils show bite marks from large predators like Tyrannosaurus that healed over the armor, meaning Ankylosaurus could survive attacks that would have killed less protected animals. The head was broad and low, with a beak at the front for cropping plants and small, leaf-shaped teeth farther back for grinding. The eyes were positioned on the sides, giving a wide field of view to spot threats approaching from any direction. From an Ankylosaurus's point of view, daily life was deliberate and cautious. Imagine waking in the shade of a conifer grove at dawn, the air cool and filled with the scent of pine resin and damp earth. You are likely alone or with one or two companions. Ankylosaurs weren't as social as hadrosaurs or ceratopsians, preferring small groups or solitary foraging most of the time. Your heavy body moves slowly across the landscape, each step measured to conserve energy. The armor makes you feel secure. Even the biggest predators think twice before attacking something that looks like a walking boulder. Feeding was the main priority. Ankylosaurus had a wide beak suited for low browsing, snipping ferns, horsetails, cycads, and the softer parts of early flowering plants. It couldn't reach high into trees like sauropods, so it focused on ground-level vegetation. The small teeth were not for slicing, but for crushing and grinding tough fibers. Food was swallowed with little chewing and likely fermented in a large gut with help from bacteria, similar to how modern cows or elephants digest grass. A single adult might eat 50 to 100 pounds of plants per day, spending long hours grazing in shaded areas to avoid overheating. Water breaks happened at streams or ponds where you waded in slowly, lowered your head, and drank deeply while keeping an ear out for splashes or distant roars. Movement was never hurried. Ankylosaurus could probably manage a short trot if needed, but it preferred walking at a steady pace, perhaps 3 to 5 miles per hour, across open woodlands or along riverbanks where soft soil cushioned its weight. The tail club dragged slightly when relaxed, but could be lifted and swung in a wide arc when threatened. This club wasn't just for show, it was a devastating weapon. Fossils of predator bones sometimes show fractures consistent with club impacts, and experiments with models suggest a full swing could deliver force like a sledgehammer. When a Tyrannosaurus approached, an Ankylosaurus would plant its feet firmly, turn sideways to present the armored back, and wait. If the predator got too close, the tail would whip around with surprising speed, the club striking legs, ribs, or skull. Many predators learned to avoid ankylosaurs unless they were young, injured, or isolated. Social life was minimal compared to other herbivores. Ankylosaurs likely lived alone or in pairs for much of the year, coming together only during mating season or in areas with abundant food. Males may have used their armor and clubs in ritualized displays, circling each other, swinging tails without full contact, or charging to test strength. Females laid eggs in simple nests scraped into soil, perhaps guarding them briefly before leaving the hatchlings to fend for themselves. Young Ankylosaurus had thinner armor that hardened as they grew, and they probably stayed hidden in underbrush until large enough to be safe. Threats were constant, but manageable. Tyrannosaurus rex was the main danger. Fossils show ankylosaur armor with T-Rex bite marks, but the armor often held up long enough for the herbivore to fight back or escape. Smaller carnivores might harass juveniles, but adults were largely untouchable. Ankylosaurus also had to deal with environmental challenges. Seasonal floods could strand them, and droughts forced migrations to wetter areas. Injuries were common, cracked armor from falls or fights, but many healed, showing resilience. In the late Cretaceous ecosystem, Ankylosaurus filled an important role, a slow, steady browser that could exploit low vegetation other herbivores overlooked. Its armor and club made it one of the most difficult prey items for predators, allowing it to survive in a world full of danger. From its perspective, the world was one of quiet persistence, grazing in the shade, listening for danger, swinging the tail only when necessary, and moving through the landscape like a living tank, secure in its own protection. Ankylosaurus thrived in this environment until the final days, when no amount of armor could shield it from what came next. Now we shift our focus from the plant eaters to the hunters at the top of the food chain, the large theropod dinosaurs. Theropods were a major branch of the dinosaur family tree, mostly carnivorous, though some later ones experimented with omnivory or even plant-based diets. For someone new to dinosaurs, theropods are the group that includes all the classic meat-eating dinosaurs like Velociraptor and T-Rex. They were bipedal, meaning they walked on two legs, had sharp claws on their hands and feet, and usually had serrated, blade-like teeth designed for slicing or crushing flesh. Unlike many modern predators that rely on speed or stealth alone, large theropods combined raw power, keen senses, and sometimes social behavior to dominate their ecosystems. Tyrannosaurus rex, often simply called T-Rex, is the most famous and one of the largest land carnivores that ever lived. It appeared in the very latest part of the Cretaceous, about 68 to 66 million years ago, mainly in western North America, places like Montana, South Dakota, and Wyoming today. An adult T-Rex was enormous, 40 to 43 feet long from nose to tail tip, longer than a city bus, and weighed 7 to 9 tons, roughly the mass of an adult male African elephant or a bit more. Its body was built for power rather than agility. The hind legs were massive columns of muscle, ending in three-toed feet with sharp claws that could grip and tear. The tail was long and heavy, acting as a counterbalance so the animal could move its huge head without tipping over. The arms were famously short, only about 3 feet long, but extremely muscular, with 2 clawed fingers each. Scientists debate their exact use, but they were strong enough to hold struggling prey or help the animal rise from a resting position. The skull of T-Rex was one of the most impressive features in all of nature. It was up to 5 feet long, deep and boxy, with powerful jaw muscles anchored to thick ridges of bone. The teeth were banana-sized, some up to 12 inches long, including the root, curved backward and serrated like steak knives along both edges. These were not for chewing, but for puncturing, slicing, and tearing. The bite force has been estimated at 8,000 to 12,000 pounds per square inch, one of the strongest of any land animal ever. A single bite could crush bone or shear off large chunks of flesh. The eyes were large and positioned forward, giving binocular vision for judging distance during attacks. The brain was relatively large for a dinosaur, with huge olfactory bulbs, which is the smell processing part, that suggest an incredible sense of smell, possibly rivaling modern vultures, allowing it to detect carrion, also known as decaying flesh, from miles away. From a T-Rex's point of view, the late Cretaceous world was a landscape of opportunity and constant challenge. Imagine being an adult T-Rex, waking at dawn in a forested river valley. The air is thick with humidity, carrying the rich scents of pine resin, wet ferns, and distant herds of hadrosaurs or ceratopsians. Your nostrils flare, or picking up the faint odor of a wounded or sick animal downwind. You rise slowly, using your short but powerful arms to push off the ground, tail swinging for balance. Your eyes scan the tree line. Forward placement lets you judge distances accurately, a key advantage for judging when to lunge. Hunting was the primary activity, though scavenging was also important. T-Rex was an opportunist. It would actively pursue live prey, but happily feed on carcasses left by floods, disease, or other predators. When hunting, it relied on a combination of stealth, power, and ambush. It might stalk through dense woodland, keeping low and using cover, then burst into a short sprint, perhaps 12 to 20 miles per hour for a few seconds, closing the distance on a hadrosaur or triceratops. The attack was brutal. Jaws open wide, teeth sinking into the flank or neck, shaking violently to tear flesh. A single well-placed bite could sever arteries or crush the spine. Fossils show healed bite marks on hadrosaur and triceratops bones, meaning T-Rex often targeted the limbs or body to cripple before going for the kill. Some evidence suggests T-Rex may have hunted in loose family groups, parents with grown offspring sharing kills and teaching young ones, though this is still debated. Life wasn't easy, even for the top predator. Fossils of T-Rex show a high rate of injuries, broken ribs, punctured skulls, infected bite wounds, and even missing fingers or tail sections. Many of these healed, indicating the animals survived fights with rivals or dangerous prey. A large T-Rex might have fought with another T-Rex over territory or mates. Skull scars match T-Rex bite patterns. Scars on the face and neck suggest headbutting or biting during dominance contests. Young T-Rex grew extremely fast, reaching near adult size in 15 to 20 years, but juveniles were vulnerable to larger adults or other predators. Social behavior is still a topic of research. Some bone beds contain multiple T-Rex individuals of different ages, suggesting they lived in family groups or at least tolerated each other near food sources. Others show solitary adults. From the animal's perspective, the world was one of scent trails and opportunities, following the smell of blood to a fresh kill, perhaps roaring to claim it from smaller scavengers, or patrolling a territory marked by footprints and droppings. Resting periods happened in shaded groves or along riverbanks, conserving energy for the next hunt. The short arms, once mocked as useless, were likely used for grasping during mating, rising from prone positions, or holding prey steady while biting. T-Rex filled a critical role in the ecosystem, keeping herbivore populations in check, removing weak or sick individuals, and recycling nutrients through scavenging. It was an apex predator. Nothing regularly hunted adults, but it lived a risky life of injury and competition. From its own viewpoint, the late Cretaceous was a world of power and patience, stalking through the undergrowth, listening for the calls of hadrosaurs, feeling the ground shake under its weight, and seizing moments of opportunity amid a landscape teeming with life. T-Rex thrived as one of the most successful large predators of all time, until the day everything changed in a flash of light from the sky. While the massive predators like Tyrannosaurus rex dominated the headlines of the late Cretaceous, a different kind of hunter filled the understory and open plains. The smaller, more agile theropods. These were fast, clever, and often social carnivores that relied on speed, teamwork, and sharp weapons rather than sheer bulk. For beginners, think of them as the wolves or leopards of the dinosaur world, smaller than the giants but deadly efficient, especially when working together. Smaller theropods belong to the same broad group as T-Rex, the theropods, but they represented a different evolutionary path: lighter builds, longer arms, and specialized killing tools. They were widespread across continents, from North America to Asia and beyond, and many had feathers, linking them directly to modern birds. Velociraptor is the most famous example, thanks in part to its dramatic portrayal in films, though the real animal was quite different from the oversized, scaly monsters sometimes shown on screen. Velociraptor lived about 75 to 71 million years ago, mainly in what is now the Gobi Desert region of Mongolia and parts of northern China. An adult velociraptor was about 6 feet long from nose to tail tip, roughly the size of a large wolf or a tall human, and weighed only 30 to 40 pounds, similar to a medium-sized dog. Its body was slender and lightweight, built for quick movement. The hind legs were long and powerful, ending in 3-toed feet with sharp claws. The most famous weapon was the second toe on each foot, which bore a large, curved, sickle-shaped claw about 3 to 4 inches long that could be raised off the ground while walking to keep it sharp. This killing claw was the signature feature of a group called dromaeosaurids, often nicknamed raptors. Velociraptor's arms were relatively long compared to T-Rex, with 3-fingered hands ending in curved, razor-sharp claws. These were perfect for grasping and holding prey during hunts. The body was covered in feathers, fossil evidence from Velociraptor itself, and especially from a very close relatives, gives us clear proof of this. On the ulna, one of the 2 long bones in the lower arm, paleontologists have found small, raised bumps called quill knobs. These are tiny, evenly spaced nodules or pits in the bone where large feathers were anchored. In modern birds, you can see the exact same kind of quill knobs on the wing bones of a chicken or turkey after the meat is removed. They look like a neat row of little buttons along the edge of the bone. These knobs are the attachment points where strong ligaments and connective tissue held the large flight or contour feathers securely in place. When scientists find these quill knobs on Velociraptor arm bones, it tells us the feathers weren't just simple fuzz or downy fluff. They were structured, modern-style pennaceous feathers, long, flat, and veined, with a central shaft, called the rachis, and branching barbs that form the flat vein surface. Some fossils even preserve carbonized impressions of these feather veins, actual traces of the feather's shape and detailed structure, including the tiny barbules and hooklets that zip the vein together like natural Velcro. This is the same kind of feather structure that lets modern birds fly, glide, display colours, or stay warm and dry, so the evidence is direct and strong. Velociraptor had arm feathers that were anchored by quill knobs and had the full, organised vein structure of bird feathers today. These feathers likely served several purposes, keeping the animal warm in cooler desert nights, helping with balance during high-speed turns and leaps, providing camouflage or display colours during mating or pack interactions, and possibly even aiding short glides or wing-assisted jumps when chasing prey. The feathers weren't just decoration, they were a key part of how Velociraptor survived and hunted in its harsh environment. The tail was long, stiff, and bony, acting like a rudder to help with sharp maneuvers while running or jumping. From a velociraptor's point of view, the late Cretaceous world was one of constant opportunity and calculated risk. Imagine being part of a small pack, perhaps 3 to 6 individuals, moving through the arid scrublands and sand dunes of ancient Mongolia at dusk. The air is dry and cool, carrying the scent of distant prey on the wind. Your feathers ruffle slightly in the breeze, helping you feel changes in air current for better balance. Your large eyes, positioned on the sides of a narrow skull, give a wide field of view to spot movement in the low light. The sickle claws are held up, clicking softly against the sand as you trot. Hunting was a group effort. Velociraptor packs worked together with surprising coordination. Fossils from Mongolia show multiple individuals preserved together, and some even died entangled with prey, like Protoceratops, a small ceratopsian. The pack would spread out to surround a target, using stealth to get close. When the moment came, they struck fast, leaping onto the back or flanks, using hand claws to cling and sickle claws to slash at vulnerable spots, belly, throat, or legs. The goal was to wound and bleed the prey out quickly, rather than wrestle it down. A single slash from the sickle claw could sever tendons or open major arteries. If the prey fought back, as Protoceratops fossils show, with beaks locked around a velociraptor's arm, the pack overwhelmed it through numbers and speed. Feathers may have flared during the attack, making the pack look larger and more intimidating. Daily life for Velociraptor involved more than hunting. The pack rested in shaded spots during the hottest part of the day, feathers helping regulate body temperature by trapping air or releasing heat. Social bonds were important, grooming behaviors, preening feathers with claws and teeth, likely strengthened group ties, much like modern birds or wolves. Communication happened through body language, hisses, and perhaps soft calls. Mating displays involved feather ruffling, head bobbing, or mock charges to show agility and health. Eggs were laid in nests scraped into sand, often guarded by the pack. Hatchlings were small and feathered, growing quickly with help from adults bringing food. Evidence from related species shows parental care in some small theropods. The Gobi environment was harsh, sandstorms, seasonal droughts, and sparse vegetation, but Velociraptor adapted well. It hunted small to medium prey, lizards, mammals, baby dinosaurs, eggs, or injured larger animals. Scavenging filled gaps between hunts. Threats included larger predators like tyrannosaur relatives, Tarbosaurus in Asia, sandstorms that could bury nests, and competition from other small carnivores. Fossils show Velociraptor with healed injuries, broken bones, claw marks, indicating it survived fights and kept hunting. Velociraptor represented a different kind of success in the late Cretaceous. brains, and teamwork over brute force. Its feathers linked it to birds, and its sickle claws made it a precision killer. From its perspective, the world was one of quick strikes, pack loyalty, and survival through cunning, darting through dunes, calling to companions, leaping on to prey with claws extended, and resting under starlit skies. It thrived in its niche until the final catastrophe arrived. While the ground was ruled by massive herbivores and powerful predators, the skies of the late Cretaceous belonged to a completely different group of flying reptiles, the pterosaurs. These were not dinosaurs. They were close relatives within the broader archosaur family, the same group that includes dinosaurs, crocodiles, and birds. But they took a unique evolutionary path to conquer the air. For someone new to this, pterosaurs were the first vertebrates, animals with backbones, to achieve powered flight, long before birds evolved. They appeared around the same time as the earliest dinosaurs in the late Triassic, about 228 million years ago, and thrived throughout the Mesozoic, reaching their greatest sizes and diversity in the Cretaceous. Pterosaurs ranged from small, crow-sized creatures to giants with wingspans wider than a small airplane. Quetzalcoatlus is the most famous example of a giant pterosaur from the very end of the Cretaceous, about 68 to 66 million years ago. It lived in what is now Texas and possibly other parts of North America. The largest individuals had wingspans estimated at 33 to 40 feet, roughly the width of a small private plane or the length of a school bus, and stood about 18 feet tall when on the ground. The body itself was relatively small and lightweight, weighing perhaps 440 to 550 pounds, comparable to a large horse or a few adult humans. The wings were formed by a thin, stretchy membrane of skin, called a patagium, supported by an extremely elongated fourth finger on each hand. This finger was as long as the entire arm and acted like a wing spar. The membrane stretched from the finger along the body, and sometimes included a small flap between the hind legs for added stability. On the ground, Quetzalcoatlus walked on all fours, using its folded wings as front limbs. The hind legs were long and slender, ending in three-toed feet with claws. The neck was extremely long and flexible, allowing the head to reach far in front or behind while walking. The skull was long and narrow with a sharp, toothless beak, perfect for snatching prey or probing for food. The eyes were large, suggesting excellent vision for spotting movement from high altitudes. The brain was relatively large for a reptile, with well-developed areas for vision and coordination, important for flight. From a Quetzalcoatlus's point of view, the late Cretaceous world was a vast, three-dimensional landscape. Imagine launching from a cliff or riverbank at dawn, the cool air rushing past as you spread your wings. The membrane snaps taut, catching the rising thermals, the columns of warm air that rise from the sun-heated ground. You soar, effortlessly, wings held in a slight V-shape, covering miles with minimal flapping. Below, the landscape unfolds. River valleys dotted with herds of hadrosaurs and ceratopsians, forests of conifers and flowering trees, and open plains where smaller dinosaurs move in groups. Your sharp eyes scan for opportunities, schools of fish in shallow rivers, dead or dying animals on the ground, or perhaps small prey like lizards or baby dinosaurs. Quetzalcoatlus was primarily a scavenger and opportunistic predator. It likely fed on carrion, dead animals, using its long neck and beak to probe inside carcasses or pick up scraps without getting too close to the body. It may also have snatched live prey, fish, amphibians, small dinosaurs, or even eggs from the ground or water surface while flying low or walking. Some scientists think it stalked like a giant stork on land, head lowered, beak ready to snap. Landing was careful. It approached slowly, wings flared to break, then folded them and walked on all fours. Takeoff was more effortful, perhaps running into the wind or jumping from a height to gain airspeed. Flight was the key to survival. Quetzalcoatlus could glide for hours on thermals, conserving energy in the warm, humid climate. The large wings provided lift and allowed soaring over vast areas to find food. Fossils show hollow bones, like birds today, which kept the skeleton light while remaining strong enough to support flight. The wings were flexible, with muscles that allowed fine control for turning, banking, and gliding. Life wasn't without danger. Strong winds or storms could ground them or cause crashes. On land, they were vulnerable to large predators like Tyrannosaurus if they couldn't take off quickly. Competition came from other pterosaurs. Smaller species filled different niches, and early birds. Mating likely involved elaborate displays, wing spreading, head bobbing, perhaps vocal calls or color changes on the crest. Some pterosaurs had crests that may have been brightly colored. Eggs were laid in nests on cliffs or islands, away from ground threats. Quetzalcoatlus represented the peak of pterosaur evolution, a gentle giant of the skies, soaring over a world of dinosaurs, using its enormous wings to cover huge territories in search of food. From its perspective, the late Cretaceous was a realm of endless horizons, riding warm air currents high above rivers and plains, eyes scanning for the next meal, wings carrying it silently across a landscape alive with giants below. It ruled the air until the very end, when the sky itself turned deadly. While the land and skies of the late Cretaceous were dominated by dinosaurs and pterosaurs, the oceans hosted some of the most fearsome and specialized predators the planet has ever seen. These were not dinosaurs. They were marine reptiles that had returned to the sea from land-dwelling ancestors, evolving into highly adapted swimmers. The most dominant group in the final stages of the Cretaceous was the mosasaurs, a family of large, predatory marine lizards that ruled the warm seas from about 82 to 66 million years ago. For someone new to this, think of mosasaurs as the Tyrannosaurus rex of the oceans, long, powerful, fully aquatic reptiles with strong jaws, sharp teeth, and a body built for speed and ambush hunting. They were not fish or marine mammals like whales or dolphins, but true reptiles that had adapted completely to life underwater, giving birth to live young and never returning to land. Mosasaurs were part of a larger group called squamates, the same reptile order that includes modern lizards and snakes, and they evolved from small, land-based lizards that gradually took to shallow, coastal waters before becoming fully oceanic. By the late Cretaceous, they had diversified into dozens of species, ranging from 10 feet long to true giants over 50 feet. The largest known, like Tylosaurus or Prognathodon, reached lengths of 45 to 55 feet, longer than a school bus, and weighed 10 to 20 tons. Their bodies were streamlined like modern dolphins or sharks, long, muscular torso tapering to a powerful tail fin for propulsion, flipper-like limbs for steering, and a flexible neck that allowed the head to turn and strike quickly. The head of a mosasaur was one of its most terrifying features. The skull was elongated and robust, with powerful jaw muscles and a double-hinged lower jaw, like modern snakes, that could open extremely wide to swallow large prey whole. The teeth were sharp, conical, and curved backward, perfect for gripping slippery fish or tearing chunks from larger animals. Some species had additional teeth on the roof of the mouth, pterygoid teeth, to hold struggling prey in place while swallowing. The eyes were large and positioned on the sides, giving excellent vision in murky water or low light. Fossils show that mosasaurs had excellent underwater hearing. Their skulls preserve large spaces for inner ears and sensitive ear bones that could pick up low-frequency sounds traveling through water, allowing them to detect distant prey struggling or other mosasaurs moving miles away. They also had something even more specialized, a lateral line system, similar to what fish have today. A lateral line is a row of tiny pores and gel-filled canals running along the sides of the body. You can see this faint line on many fish like sharks or trout. Inside these canals are sensitive hair-like cells that detect the tiniest vibrations, ripples, and pressure changes in the water. When a fish swims nearby, a tail flicks, or prey thrashes, it creates invisible waves that the lateral line feels, like having touch sensors all along the body. Mosasaurs appear to have had a version of this system, with fossil evidence of small pits and grooves along the jaw and body that likely held these vibration-sensing organs. Together, their sharp hearing and lateral line gave them an almost supernatural ability to track prey in murky water, even when they couldn't see clearly. From a mosasaur's point of view, the late Cretaceous oceans were a vast, three-dimensional hunting ground. Imagine gliding through warm, clear waters near a coral reef or open sea. The sunlight filters down in shifting beams, illuminating schools of fish, ammonites, coiled-shelled relatives of squid, sea turtles, and smaller marine reptiles. Your body undulates smoothly, tail fin propelling you forward with powerful side-to-side strokes. The flippers steer you left or right, up or down, with precision. You can dive deep or surface quickly to breathe. Mosasaurs were air breathers like modern whales, so they rose every few minutes to gulp air, nostrils on top of the snout flaring as they exhaled and inhaled. Hunting was opportunistic and varied. Mosasaurs were apex predators, feeding on almost anything they could catch: fish, sharks, ammonites, sea turtles, plesiosaurs, other mosasaurs, and even seabirds or floating carrion. They used ambush tactics, lurking in murky water or behind reefs, then exploding forward in a burst of speed to seize prey. The double-hinged jaw allowed them to swallow animals larger than their head in one gulp. Fossils sometimes preserve stomach contents, fish bones, turtle shells, ammonite shells, and even smaller mosasaur remains. Showing cannibalism was common. Some species specialized. Long-snouted ones probed crevices for eels or crustaceans, while robust-jawed ones crushed turtle shells or ammonite chambers. The ocean ecosystem was rich and layered. Surface waters teemed with schools of bony fish and ammonites, while deeper zones had giant squid-like belemnites and sharks. Coral reefs made of rudest clams and other builders provided hiding places and nurseries. Sea turtles glided through, laying eggs on beaches. Plesiosaurs, the long-necked sea reptiles, and ichthyosaurs, dolphin-like sea reptiles, still existed, but were declining as mosasaurs rose to dominance. From a mosasaur's perspective, the sea was a world of constant motion, currents carrying scents of blood, vibrations signaling prey, sunlight patterns shifting overhead. They patrolled territories, sometimes clashing with rivals over food or mates, leaving bite scars on each other's bones. Reproduction was fully aquatic. Mosasaurs gave birth to live young underwater. Fossils show pregnant females with embryos inside, and juveniles were born ready to swim and hunt. This freed them from needing land for nesting, allowing them to roam open oceans. Growth was rapid. Hatchlings doubled in size quickly, reaching maturity in a few years. Life wasn't without threats. Rival mosasaurs, large sharks, or even giant pliosaurs, earlier marine reptiles, could pose danger. Storms churned the seas, and food could be scarce during migrations or seasonal changes. Fossils show healed injuries, broken jaws, bite marks, regrown teeth, indicating they survived fights and kept hunting. In the late Cretaceous marine world, mosasaurs were the undisputed top predators, fast, powerful, and adaptable. From their perspective, the ocean was an endless realm of opportunity, gliding through warm currents, sensing prey from afar, striking with open jaws, and swallowing whole in a single motion. They ruled the seas until the very end, when the same catastrophe that ended the dinosaurs on land brought darkness and collapse to the underwater world as well. While dinosaurs and pterosaurs dominated the land and skies, and mosasaurs ruled the seas, two other groups of animals lived quietly in the background of the late Cretaceous world: early birds and mammals. These were not the main stars of the ecosystem, but they were important survivors that would inherit the planet after the meteor impact. For someone new to this, birds are actually living dinosaurs, the only dinosaur lineage that survived to the present day. Mammals, on the other hand, were small, mostly nocturnal creatures that had coexisted with dinosaurs for millions of years but stayed in the shadows. Both groups were tiny compared to the giants around them, but their adaptations and lifestyles allowed them to endure when everything else disappeared. Let's start with the early birds. Birds evolved from small feathered theropod dinosaurs during the Jurassic period about 150 million years ago, and by the late Cretaceous they had already diversified into many forms. These were true birds, animals with feathers, beaks, in most cases, and the ability to fly or at least glide. They were not large. Most late Cretaceous birds were the size of modern sparrows, robins, or crows, though a few reached the size of a large turkey or small goose. One well-known example is Ichthyornis, a seabird from North America that looked like a cross between a gull and a tern. It had a full set of teeth in its beak, unlike modern birds, strong wings for powered flight, and webbed feet for swimming and diving. Another group, the enantiornithines, sometimes called opposite birds because of differences in shoulder bones, were widespread and varied. Some had long tails, others had toothless beaks, and many were excellent flyers. From an early bird's point of view, the late Cretaceous world was a place of opportunity in the treetops and along coastlines. Imagine being a small, sparrow-sized bird perched on a branch at dawn. The air is warm and humid, filled with the scent of blooming flowers and pine resin. Your feathers keep you insulated during cooler nights, and your lightweight, hollow bones make flying effortless. You launch from the branch, wings beating rapidly, and glide down to a riverbank. There, You probe the mud or shallow water for insects, small fish, seeds, or even baby dinosaur eggs left unguarded. Your beak is sharp or tooth-lined, perfect for snatching prey. Flight lets you escape ground predators easily. When a small theropod like a troodon approaches, you simply take to the air, circling high above until it's safe to land again. Birds filled many niches. Some were seabirds that soared over oceans, diving for fish like modern gulls. Others lived in forests, eating seeds, fruits, or insects. A few were ground dwellers or weak flyers that foraged on the forest floor. They nested in trees, on cliffs, or in burrows, laying eggs in simple scrapes or woven structures. Parents often guarded nests and fed hatchlings. Their small size and ability to fly or hide in dense vegetation protected them from most large predators. Fossils show that some birds had modern-style feathers with barbules, tiny hooks that zip feathers together for waterproofing and flight efficiency, proving they were already highly advanced flyers. Now, let's look at the mammals. Mammals had existed since the Triassic period, about 225 million years ago, living alongside dinosaurs the whole time. But they remained small and inconspicuous. In the late Cretaceous, most mammals were no bigger than modern rats, mice, or small opossums, typically 1 to 5 pounds, some as small as a shrew. They were furry, warm-blooded, and nursed their young with milk, true defining traits of mammals. Many were nocturnal, coming out at night when large dinosaurs were less active. Examples include multituberculates, extinct rodent-like mammals with specialized teeth for grinding plants and seeds, metatherians, marsupial ancestors, and early placentals, ancestors of most modern mammals. From a mammal's point of view, the late Cretaceous world was one of caution and clever hiding. Imagine being a small, rat-sized multituberculate scurrying through leaf litter at dusk. Your fur keeps you warm during cool nights, and your large eyes and sensitive whiskers help you navigate in low light. You live in burrows or under fallen logs, emerging after dark to avoid being stepped on or eaten by dinosaurs. Your diet is varied: insects, seeds, small fruits, eggs, or even baby dinosaurs if you can find an unguarded nest. Your sharp teeth and strong jaws let you crack seeds or chew tough plants. When danger approaches, a rustle from a troodon or the heavy footsteps of a hadrosaur, you freeze or dart back into your burrow. Your small size and burrowing ability are your best defenses. Mammals were diverse in lifestyle. Some were insect eaters that scampered through underbrush. Others were omnivores that raided nests or scavenged. A few were semi-aquatic or tree dwellers. They reproduced quickly, with short pregnancies and litters of young. Fossils show some had fur impressions and even milk teeth in juveniles, confirming they nursed like modern mammals. Their small size and nocturnal habits let them exploit niches dinosaurs ignored: nighttime foraging, burrowing, and eating tiny food items. Both early birds and mammals played quiet but important roles in the late Cretaceous ecosystem. Birds helped pollinate early flowers and spread seeds, while mammals helped recycle nutrients through scavenging and burrowing. They were not dominant. They lived in the margins, but their adaptations, flight, fur, warm-bloodedness, quick reproduction, gave them resilience. From their perspectives, the world was dangerous but full of hidden opportunities. A bird soaring above herds to find insects, a mammal slipping through shadows to raid a nest. They were the underdogs, surviving day by day in a land of giants until the meteor arrived and the giants fell, giving these small survivors the chance to inherit the Earth. Up to this point, we've explored a world that had been thriving for millions of years, a balanced, vibrant ecosystem where dinosaurs, pterosaurs, marine reptiles, early birds, and small mammals all lived out their lives under a seemingly endless sky. But everything was about to change in a way no creature could have anticipated. The event that ended the Cretaceous and the entire Age of Dinosaurs began not on Earth, but far out in space, with a single, massive chunk of rock and metal hurtling toward our planet. This object was an asteroid, roughly 6 to 9 miles, 10 to 15 kilometers wide, about the size of Mount Everest laid on its side. Asteroids are leftover building blocks from the early solar system, rocky or metallic fragments that never formed into planets. This one had spent billions of years orbiting the Sun in the main asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter, a region full of similar rocky fragments over countless orbits, gravitational tugs from Jupiter, the solar system's largest planet, or other bodies slowly nudged its path. Tiny changes over millions of years aligned it with Earth's orbit at exactly the wrong moment. From Earth's point of view, the very first hint would have been invisible to the naked eye. For weeks or even months, the asteroid was just another faint point of reflected sunlight among the stars, too dim to notice unless you were a creature with exceptional night vision. Nocturnal hunters like troodons, small, intelligent theropods with large eyes adapted for low light, or early mammals might have registered it as a new, wandering star that moved slightly against the fixed background of constellations. But to them, stars moved slowly anyway. Some bright points, like Venus or Jupiter, already wandered, so this was not alarming. It was just one more light in a sky full of lights. As the weeks passed, the asteroid drew closer to the inner solar system. Its brightness increased because it reflected more sunlight as it approached the Sun and us. By perhaps 2 to 4 weeks out, it would have become visible to sharp-eyed animals during twilight or deep night, brighter than most stars, with a faint tail of reflected light or outgassing material, ice turning to vapor in the sun's warmth. A Parasaurolophus herd resting by a river at dusk might have had 1 or 2 individuals lift their heads, crests catching the last light, eyes reflecting this new point that hadn't been there the night before. A velociraptor pack hunting under moonlight could pause mid-stalk, sickle claws raised, as one member chirped softly at the sky. Early birds roosting in trees might ruffle feathers, their large eyes picking up the anomaly. But still, no panic. The sky had always changed slowly with seasons and weather. This was just another slow shift. In the final 7 to 10 days, the asteroid crossed into the inner solar system and began to accelerate under the Sun's gravity. Its speed increased to around 40,000 miles per hour, about 20 kilometers per second, relative to Earth. Now it was bright enough to be seen in early evening or late afternoon on the side of the planet facing it. To animals with good color vision or those active in twilight, it appeared as a steady, white-yellow point that moved noticeably against the stars over the course of an hour, something no star or planet does so quickly. This is when confusion might have started. A flock of early seabirds soaring over the western interior seaway could have circled higher, calling in unease as the light refused to stay fixed. Small mammals emerging at twilight might freeze at burrow entrances, whiskers twitching as the strange glow grew brighter each night. In the last 24 to 48 hours, the asteroid became dramatically obvious. It grew from a point to a small disk, then to a visible streak as it neared Earth's atmosphere. On the day side of the planet, it appeared in broad daylight as a brilliant, moving star, brighter than Venus, trailing a short, glowing tail of ionized gas and dust. The light was intense enough to cast very faint shadows even under full sun, and the streak crossed a large part of the sky in under a minute. The air ahead of it began to compress and heat, creating a glowing plasma sheath that made it look like a second sun streaking across the heavens. Animal reactions would have varied by species, location, and exact timing. On land in North America, thousands of miles from the impact site, a triceratops herd grazing in late morning might suddenly stop. Heads lift, nasal horns glinting in the sun, as a blinding white streak appears overhead. The light is so bright it hurts to look at directly. Shadows shift unnaturally. Low grunts ripple through the group, confusion turning to alarm. Juveniles press closer to adults, who stomp feet and lower horns instinctively. The sound arrives seconds later, a deep, building rumble like distant thunder, but growing louder and more ominous by the second. In the same region, Parasaurolophus herds near rivers would react with a chorus of crest calls, deep, resonant booms echoing across the floodplain as the streak brightens. The herd bunches, young in the center, adults facing outward. Some individuals might rear up on hind legs for a better view, tails lashing. Velociraptor packs in scrubland or forest edges could scatter, feathers flaring, sickle claws digging into soil as they sprint for cover. The sudden light and roar would trigger pure instinct, freeze, flee, or hide. Pterosaurs like Quetzalcoatlus in flight would experience it most intensely. High above, soaring on thermals, they see the streak as a dazzling line of fire cutting across the sky. The brightness overwhelms even their large eyes. Wings falter for a moment as turbulence from the shockwave precursor buffets them. Some might dive toward the ground, others bank sharply away from the light source. In the oceans, mosasaurs surfacing for air would feel the pressure wave first, a sudden vibration through water, then see the sky blaze as they break the surface. They dive immediately, powerful tails driving them deep. On the night side of Earth, Asia, Europe, parts of the southern hemisphere, the approach was a spectacular meteor show. The streak appeared as a brilliant fireball crossing the starry sky, growing from a point to a glowing trail in seconds. Nocturnal mammals in burrows might poke heads out, eyes reflecting the glow, whiskers trembling at the unnatural brightness and rumble. Small theropods hunting at night freeze mid-step, feathers raised. Birds roosting in trees take flight in panic, wings beating against the sudden light. The rumble arrives as a low vibration felt through the ground. Animals with sensitive feet or bellies pressing to the earth would sense it first. No creature understood the threat. There was no concept of space rocks or planetary collisions. To them, this was simply wrong. A new light, brighter than the sun by day, a falling star that roared by night, a sound that shook bones and made hearts race. The streak lasted only seconds to a couple of minutes from any one vantage point, but it was long enough to spread unease across continents, calls of alarm echoing from herds, wings beating in sudden flight, creatures diving or hiding. Then came a brief, eerie silence as the asteroid plunged through the final layers of atmosphere and struck Earth. The asteroid had crossed the upper atmosphere in a blaze of fire and light, its entry lasting only seconds to a minute from any single point on Earth. Now, in the final few seconds, it plunged through the lower layers of the atmosphere, the troposphere, where clouds form and weather happens, straight toward the surface. At this point, the object was no longer intact. The extreme heating and pressure had caused it to fragment slightly. Pieces broke off, creating a swarm of smaller fireballs trailing the main body like sparks from a grinding wheel. The main mass, still roughly 6 to 9 miles wide, continued downward at tremendous speed, compressing air so violently that temperatures reached millions of degrees Celsius, hotter than the core of the sun. The asteroid itself began to vaporize from the outside in, its outer layers boiling away into gas and molten droplets called tektites, small glass beads that would later rain down across the planet. The impact occurred over what is now the Yucatan Peninsula in Mexico, striking a shallow sea covering limestone bedrock rich in sulfur and calcium carbonate, the same material that makes seashells and chalk. The asteroid hit at an angle of about 45 to 60 degrees, traveling at approximately 12 miles per second, 20 kilometers per second. The energy released was equivalent to billions of times the explosive power of the largest nuclear bombs ever detonated by humans, roughly 100 trillion tons of TNT, or 10 to 100 million times the energy of the Krakatoa eruption in 1883. This single collision is one of the most violent events in Earth's 4.6 billion year history. From the moment of contact, everything happened in rapid succession. The asteroid punched through the water and into the seabed in less than a second, vaporizing instantly upon impact. The kinetic energy converted almost entirely into heat and shock. A massive fireball erupted upward, hundreds of miles wide, brighter than 1,000 suns. The flash was so intense that any creature within line of sight, even thousands of miles away, would have been temporarily blinded if looking directly at it. The heat from this fireball ignited everything flammable within hundreds of miles. Forests burst into flame, dry vegetation exploded, and even wet plants smoldered or caught fire from the radiant energy. Simultaneously, a crater began to form. The initial excavation phase lasted only seconds. The impactor and target rock melted and vaporized, creating a transient cavity 110 miles, 180 kilometers wide, and 12 miles, 20 kilometers deep. Rock from the seabed and deeper crust was ejected at escape velocity. Some material left Earth's gravity entirely, raining back as tektites or orbiting briefly as dust. The crater rim rose like a ring of mountains, while the center rebounded upward in a central peak, a common feature in large impact craters. The entire Yucatan region was obliterated, limestone turned to glass, water vaporized, and the shallow sea boiled away in an instant. Shockwaves radiated outward in all directions. The ground wave traveled through Earth's crust at thousands of miles per hour, causing earthquakes of magnitude 10 or higher, strong enough to trigger landslides, collapse cliffs, and liquefy soil across continents. The air blast was even more devastating. A supersonic shockwave flattened forests for hundreds of miles, snapping trees like matchsticks, hurling boulders, and scouring the surface. Within 600 miles, 1,000 kilometers of the impact. The overpressure was strong enough to strip flesh from bone or pulverize small animals. Farther away, the blast arrived as hurricane-force winds, 200 to 500 miles per hour, knocking down trees, shattering rock, and creating firestorms as it ignited debris. Tsunamis formed immediately. The impact displaced billions of tons of water in the shallow sea, sending walls of water hundreds of feet high racing outward. These mega-tsunamis flooded coastal plains in the Gulf of Mexico, Caribbean, and Atlantic coasts, carrying sediment and debris inland for miles. In North America, the waves would have reached the western interior seaway, surging up river valleys and drowning low-lying areas. From the animals' perspectives, the moment of impact was apocalyptic and instantaneous. In North America, thousands of miles from the site, the first sign was the blinding flash, brighter than the sun. Even through closed eyelids, a T-Rex mid-hunt might stagger, roaring in pain as its eyes burned. The ground shook violently next, felt in the legs and belly like a massive earthquake, causing trees to topple and rivers to slosh. Then the air blast arrived, a wall of wind roaring like 1,000 storms, hurling dust, branches, and bodies. Parasaurolophus herds stampeded blindly, crests blaring as the wind lifted juveniles off their feet. Triceratops planted legs and lowered heads, frills catching debris like sails. But many were bowled over or crushed under falling trees. Velociraptor packs were scattered, feathers torn, claws scraping as they were thrown against rocks. Pterosaurs in flight were tossed like leaves in a tornado. Quetzalcoatlus, high above, felt the shock wave as a sudden, violent gust, wings buckling, body tumbling. Some crashed into the ground or sea, others were carried miles before regaining control. In the oceans, mosasaurs felt the pressure wave first, a crushing pulse through water, followed by massive waves that churned the surface into froth. Fish schools were scattered, turtles flipped, and even deep divers were slammed by turbulence. Closer to the impact, Central America, Gulf region, the destruction was total. The fireball vaporized everything within hundreds of miles, dinosaurs, plants, soil, water, instantly. No creatures survived there. The landscape became a glowing, molten wasteland. Farther out, the initial flash ignited wildfires that would burn for weeks, the air filled with smoke, ash, and sulphurous gases, turning day to twilight in hours. The moment of impact lasted mere seconds, but its effects rippled outward for days, weeks, and years. The sky darkened, temperatures plummeted, and the world began to unravel. For the animals that survived the first minutes, the true nightmare was just beginning. The asteroid's violent plunge through the atmosphere had ended with a world-shattering strike into the shallow seas of the Yucatan Peninsula, releasing an unimaginable burst of energy. But the impact itself was just the spark. The real devastation unfolded in the minutes that followed as waves of destruction rippled outward across land, sea, and sky. Let's take an even closer, slower look at those critical first 10 minutes after contact, breaking it down second by second and minute by minute. This is the phase where the immediate effects, shock waves, ejecta rain, fires, and more, began to reshape the planet in real time. No animal could have prepared for it. Their reactions were raw, instinctive responses to a world suddenly turned hostile. We'll explore how it felt from the perspectives of different species and locations, explaining each process step by step so you can truly imagine the chaos. The first 5 to 10 seconds. the initial blast, and fireball expansion. In the very first seconds after the asteroid vaporized on contact, the energy release created a massive fireball, a glowing sphere of plasma and superheated gas expanding outward at supersonic speeds. This fireball was hundreds of miles across and hotter than the surface of the sun, vaporizing everything in the immediate vicinity. Water from the shallow sea boiled away in an instant, turning to steam. Bedrock limestone melted into molten glass, and any nearby animals or plants were incinerated before they could even react. The flash from this fireball was so bright it illuminated the entire hemisphere, visible even on the opposite side of the planet as a brief glow on the horizon. From the animals' viewpoints closest to the site, within 100 to 300 miles in Central America or the Gulf region, there was no survival. A mosasaur swimming in the shallow sea would feel a sudden, crushing pressure wave through the water, like being hit by a wall of force, followed by boiling heat that cooked its body from the inside out. Pterosaurs flying overhead would be engulfed in the rising plume, wings charring as the fireball expanded on land nearby. If any dinosaurs were present, though the area was likely more marine, they would be vaporized mid-step, their last sensation a blinding white light and searing heat. Farther out, 300 to 600 miles, southern North America or northern South America, the flash arrived first as a dazzling burst that burned retinas and cast stark shadows. A Parasaurolophus herd might have just registered the streak's end when the light hit, eyes watering, crests vibrating from the initial rumble. The heat wave followed, like opening a blast furnace door, singeing feathers and scales. Fires ignited spontaneously as dry leaves and wood smouldered from radiant energy alone. 10 to 60 seconds after, the ground shockwave and crater formation as the fireball rose, the ground shockwave, seismic waves travelling through Earth's crust, radiated outward at speeds of 3 to 5 miles per second, 5 to 8 kilometers per second. This was like the biggest earthquake imaginable, magnitude 10 or higher, causing the ground to ripple like water in a pond after a stone is thrown. Cliffs collapsed, hillsides slid away, and riverbanks crumbled. The crater itself formed in these seconds, the initial hole excavated to 12 miles deep, with molten rock splashing out like water from a cannonball dive. The rim rose as displaced material piled up into temporary mountains. From animal perspectives in North America, 1,000 to 2,000 miles away, the ground shook violently first, felt as a deep vibration through feet and bellies, like standing on a drum being beaten. A T-Rex resting in a grove would stagger, legs buckling as the earth heaved, trees toppled around it, branches cracking like whips. The rumble built to a thunderous roar that drowned out all other sounds. Triceratops herds braced, horns digging into soil, but many were thrown off balance, rolling into each other amid clouds of dust. Juveniles were trampled in the panic, frills cracking against rocks, in Asia or Europe. Nightside, farther away, the seismic wave arrived as a rolling quake, ground undulating, burrows collapsing on small mammals. Velociraptor packs felt it in mid-hunt, claws scrambling as the earth shifted under them. Birds in trees were knocked from perches, wings flapping wildly in the dark. Oceans transmitted the wave as underwater tremors. Mosasaurs twisted in confusion as currents surged unnaturally. 1 to 3 minutes after, the air blast arrival. The atmospheric shockwave, compressed air expanding outward at supersonic speeds, followed the ground wave. This air blast was like the ultimate hurricane, with winds peaking at 500 to 1,000 miles per hour near the crater and still 200 to 300 miles per hour thousands of miles away. It flattened landscapes. Forests were stripped bare, lakes were emptied momentarily, and debris was hurled for miles. From a Quetzalcoatlus' view in flight over North America, the blast hits as a sudden wall of wind. Wings snap like sails in a gale, body tumbling end over end. The roar is deafening, pressure popping eardrums. Some are slammed into the ground, bones shattering. Others are carried aloft, disoriented. On land, Ankylosaurus weather it best. Their low, armoured bodies hug the ground like rocks in a river. The wind howls over them. Debris bouncing off plates, but they hold, tails braced. Hadrosaurs are less lucky. Herds are scattered. Individuals lifted and thrown, crests silent amid the chaos. Mosasaurs in the Gulf feel it as massive surface waves, water heaving, bodies flipped like toys. Fish are stunned or killed by pressure changes. The air above fills with spray and foam. 3 to 5 minutes after, ejecta rain begins. Molten tektites and larger debris start falling back. These glowing projectiles, ranging from dust to boulder-sized, rain down, igniting wildfires as they land hot. Near the crater, the rain is thick and lethal, incinerating survivors. Farther out, it's sparser but still deadly. Embers set dry grasslands ablaze. A surviving velociraptor in Asia sees the sky fill with falling stars, hot, hissing rocks that burn feathers on impact. Packs flee burning scrub, lungs burning from smoke. Triceratops herds choke on ash, eyes streaming as fires encircle them. The smell is acrid, sulphur, burning wood, scorched earth. 6 to 10 minutes after, tsunamis form and secondary effects emerge. Mega-tsunamis, walls of water 300 to 1,000 feet high, radiate from the Gulf, flooding coasts within minutes. Inland, secondary quakes cause landslides, fires merge into firestorms, sucking in oxygen and creating winds. From a mosasaur's underwater view, tsunamis hit as churning chaos, currents pulling in all directions, sediment clouding water. Bodies are smashed against reefs or sucked into depths. On land, rivers surge backward from coastal waves, drowning lowlands. Pterosaurs that landed are swept away. Herds near shores are obliterated. The air thickens with dust and gas. Sulfur dioxide from vaporized rocks creates choking fumes. Breathing becomes labored. Eyes and throats burn. The sky darkens noticeably, even in day, as dust blocks sunlight. For survivors, the first 10 minutes mark the shift from shock to suffering. The world is forever altered, and the long dying begins. The first 10 minutes after the asteroid strike had been a whirlwind of blinding light, earth-shaking tremors, roaring winds, falling fire, and spreading chaos. But those initial moments were only the opening act. Now, as the hours stretched on, roughly the first 1 to 12 hours after impact, the full scale of the catastrophe began to reveal itself. The world didn't end in a single flash. It unraveled slowly, layer by layer, in ways that would have felt endless and incomprehensible to any surviving creature. In the first hour, firestorms and ashfall dominated. Wildfires merged into self-sustaining blazes. Smoke turned the sky angry orange-red. Breathing became painful, with the bitter taste of charred wood and sulphur. Triceratops herds regrouped with hoarse calls, stumbling through debris, while Parasaurolophus waded into rivers for refuge, only to cough from drifting embers. Velociraptor packs darted for cover with singed feathers, pterosaurs struggled in thick haze, and mosasaurs felt fallout settle on the surface, reducing oxygen. Then, in hours, 1 to 3 mega-tsunamis arrived. Walls of water, hundreds of feet high, swept coastal herds away, flooding valleys and reversing rivers, drowning trapped animals inland. By hours 3 to 6, a global dust cloud darkened the sky. Sunlight dimmed to a dull red. Temperatures dropped sharply. A T-Rex shivered as scents were masked, and prey vanished. Birds lost navigation in reduced light. Mammals huddled, conserving energy. Then, in hours, 6 to 10, acid rain began. Corrosive drops stung skin and poisoned water. Plants wilted. Herbivores drank burning streams. Digestion slowed. Fires raged on, shifting survivors from immediate terror to creeping despair. The sun hidden, air foul, water dangerous, food dying. The giants already weakening while small survivors endured. The first days plunged the world into deepening darkness and freezing cold. The long dark of impact, winter began. By day, one sunlight reduced 20 to 50%. The sun, a blood-red disk behind haze. Temperatures fell 5 to 15 degrees. Triceratops herds searched barren landscapes with hoarse calls, plants curling brown, breath clouding in cold air. Parasaurolophus faced clouded oxygen-poor rivers. Velociraptor huddled with stiff muscles. Birds struggled in dim light. Mammals entered torpor. Mosasaurs surfaced in murky, ash-laden water as plankton died. By day, sunlight dropped 50 to 90%. Perpetual twilight set in. Temperatures plunged further. T-Rex ached in unfamiliar cold. Herbivores collapsed from starvation and hypothermia. Calls faded. Birds and mammals conserved energy. Oceans became dead zones. By days 3 to 4, photosynthesis halted. Leaves fell. Acid rain intensified, burning skin and poisoning water. Herbivores starved en masse. Predators turned to cannibalism. Marine life collapsed rapidly. By days 5 to 7, perpetual twilight ruled. Temperatures dropped 20 to 40 degrees. Plants died completely. The world fell silent. No calls, only wind through bare trees. Large dinosaurs vanished rapidly. Small survivors clung to life in pockets, waiting. Then, as weeks turned to months, prolonged impact, winter gripped the planet. Sunlight blocked severely, temperatures far below normal. Ecosystems collapsed. Non-avian dinosaurs gone forever. In weeks 1 to 2, perpetual dim twilight and deep freeze dominated. Surviving Triceratops suffered quiet, unrelenting bleakness, collapsing from hunger and cold. Parasaurolophus dwindled. Smaller animals showed resilience with torpor and scavenging. Oceans darkened with phytoplankton extinction. By weeks 3 to 8, full darkness arrived. True night during day. Large dinosaurs became rare, bodies preserved in cold. Giants vanished. Smaller survivors scavenged and endured. Months 2 to 6 brought the long winter. Sunlight slowly returned to 10 to 30%. Frozen carcasses fed scavengers. Small mammals and birds dominated. Large dinosaurs extinct. Oceans stabilized slightly in depths. By months 6 to 12, dust cleared further. Sunlight reached 50 to 80%. Temperatures rose slowly. Pioneer plants sprouted. Small survivors repopulated. The non-avian dinosaurs gone forever. Birds carried the dinosaur lineage. Mammals rose from hidden beginnings. The world scarred, but healing. Over tens of thousands of years, dust rained out. Sunlight returned to 70 to 90%. Pioneer plants greened the barren land. Mammals exploded in diversity, filling every niche. Birds diversified. Oceans rebuilt from deep waters. Over the next 66 million years, the Cenozoic era, the age of mammals, the survivors' descendants, reshaped Earth. From Cretaceous birds came eagles, owls, songbirds, penguins, ostriches, more than 10,000 species today, the living legacy of theropods. From tiny rat-sized mammals came elephants, whales, primates, humans, filling every niche once held by dinosaurs. The planet healed, though scarred. Iridium layers mark the impact forever. Forests regrew, flowers exploded, coral reefs rebuilt, new food webs formed. The Chicxulub asteroid closed the age of dinosaurs but opened another. The giants fell, the small, adaptable, hidden ones rose. In every bird that sings at dawn, every mammal that walks under the sun, every flower that blooms after rain, we hear the quiet echoes of that long-ago catastrophe. Life did not end. It adapted. It endured. And from the ruins of one world, it built the one we know today. The meteor that ended the dinosaurs did not destroy life. It reshaped it. And in that reshaping, the story of Earth continued, resilient, evolving, and ultimately leading to us, here, listening to the deep time echoes of a world that once was. This concludes our journey through the day the meteor hit and the long legacy that followed. Thank you for traveling through deep time with me. Until the next echo.